What's the craziest one in a million thing that's ever happened to you? Story 1. This is more like 1 in a billion, but the only thing I got out of it was an amazing story. I'll keep this brief. My name is John. My best friend's name is Caleb. Caleb's mom is attractive, and I tease him about it because that's what friends do. Her name is Donna. One night, Caleb and I were drunk at a karaoke bar. I submitted my song to the DJ, but instead of my real name, I wrote John Donna, a mashup of my name and Caleb's mom's name. The goal, have the DJ announce, "Up next is John Donna." And he did. Funny, right? That's when things got weird. I go up to the stage, the DJ hands me the mic, and I take it, until a woman approaches and snatches it from my hand. I politely ask, "What the heck, lady?" She replies, "Nice try, a-hole, but I am John Donna." I look at her, then the DJ, then Caleb, who had no idea I wrote that name on the card, so he couldn't have set this up. I say, "Your name is John Donna." She nods and shows me her card. There it is, John Donna, not in my handwriting. I've never met anyone with that name before. Even meeting someone with that name randomly? 1 in a million? Meeting someone with that name while out with Caleb? 1 in a billion. Meeting someone with that name while out with Caleb and clashing with them the way we did? 1 in a trillion. To this day, it's still the most perfectly absurd, star-aligned random thing that has ever happened to me. Before we continue, do us a quick favor. Smash that like button and subscribe to support our channel. Story 2. I was on Tinder talking to a guy who was supposed to meet me for dinner. I texted him and got no answer, so I tried messaging him on Tinder. He said he couldn't make it. Then I got a text from the number I had messaged, and it wasn't the guy I thought I was talking to. It was the actor Gerard Butler. At first, I thought he was joking until he FaceTimed me. He was a really nice guy. Edit. I never went on a date with him. He lives on the West Coast. I live on the East Coast. I didn't keep his number out of respect for his privacy. When he FaceTimed me, he was super casual, asked why I was using Tinder, and wished me luck. Story 3. I was at volleyball camp the summer between elementary school and middle school. One day, I started having sharp but moderate pains in my pelvic area. At first, I thought it was period cramps because the pain came in waves like contractions, and I knew it wasn't a stomachache. I mentioned it to my coach at the end of the day. He said it might just be muscle cramps from the brutal conditioning we'd been doing. That seemed reasonable, so he gave me some tips, which I followed exactly. That night, I had no other pain. 2 days later, the pain came back, sharper this time, with longer-lasting contractions. I told my coach again, and he basically wrote me off, frustrated, assuming I was being lazy and trying to skip running. I'd paid for this camp with my own money, saved for a year. If I didn't want to be there, I wouldn't have been. I pushed harder than I ever had, determined to make it through the day. But the contractions kept getting worse, longer, sharper, and closer together. The breaks between them started disappearing while the pain built. I remember thinking, there's no way this could get worse. I truly thought I was dying. The other girls noticed and grew concerned, which only seemed to anger my coach more. He insisted it was just workout cramps, that I was being dramatic, and that I was distracting everyone. At this point, I could barely focus on his words. I couldn't even try to explain the pain. I was seeing black spots, had tunnel vision, felt dizzy, and had a strange sensation of my waistband tightening on top of the excruciating pain. I finally interrupted him and asked if I could call my mother. He said absolutely not. He would toughen me up. He said he was running a camp to make athletes, not a daycare. So I went back to running laps. I wasn't crying. I felt trapped in hell. I should also mention that we were in a hot and humid gym with no air conditioning, in the middle of July in North Carolina, commonly known as Hell Week. The heat index in that gym was at least 120 degrees. During a water break, an absolute angel about 4 years older than me noticed me struggling. She held up her cell phone and tucked it into my lunchbox. I'll never forget her. Out of nowhere, I had to puke. I had no warning. I just had to go now. I yelled bathroom to my coach and ran for the locker room, knowing that if I hesitated any longer, he would have been furious if I vomited on the court. This man yells at me, If you leave this court for bathroom right now, you will no longer be a member of this camp and will get no refund. So I did the fastest U-turn of my life, grabbed my lunchbox, ran outside, and projectile vomited on the sidewalk. I knew something was seriously wrong. I had never puked like that, and the pain was now so intense I could barely breathe. I was probably having a panic attack. I took out the girl's phone and called my mom, but she was 25 minutes away at work. In that kind of pain, 25 minutes might as well have been 25 years. Thankfully, my grandmother lived 5 miles away and came to pick me up. I don't remember waiting for her, getting in the car or the drive, but my grandmother said I had been lying on the pavement in the fetal position, surrounded by my vomit. She got me into the car, took the phone from me, and went to confront my coach to give it back to the girl and tell him I would not be returning and would be getting a refund. He tried to argue, but she walked away mid-sentence. She called my mom to let her know she was taking me to the ER. At the hospital, the doctor initially thought my appendix had burst, but he was concerned because nothing should have caused this much pain. He ordered an X-ray and gave me 2 doses of morphine. I was still in intense pain, but just coherent enough to explain everything. The vomiting, the sharpness and location of the pain, and most telling, the contractions. It was like a switch flipped in his head. He canceled the X-ray, ordered a CT scan, and got a urine sample from me. My urine was bright pink, pure blood, exactly what the doctor expected after hearing all the details. The scan came back. I had between 75 and 100 kidney stones in each kidney. I had already passed one in the ER. There was literally a stone in the urine cup. I was referred to multiple specialists at the best hospitals in the state, and at every one I became a kind of circus act, the incredible 11-year-old with 100 stones in each kidney. I was used as a teaching example for resident doctors. It turns out I have a rare kidney disease that affects the acid pH balance in my body, causing chronic recurring kidney stones. It's rare in adults, extremely rare in little girls. I have many stories from over the years of what I've gone through, but the day we discovered my kidney disease was truly 1 in a million for everyone involved. Everyone, especially my team of doctors, was in awe and shock. And what about that coach? The next day, my father went to the school with a copy of my diagnosis. I wasn't there, but knowing him, he verbally tore into the coach and called the superintendent. Apparently, I wasn't the first person to have problems with this man. Within a year, he was fired due to multiple complaints, including the fact that he had been peeping in the locker rooms when no one else was there, and even essayed a few girls. So yes, he was a dirtbag. And that refund? My dad got it back real quick. Story 4. I am schizophrenic. While I was in a psychotic and delusional episode, I got targeted by a semi-religious online cult. Their actions severely worsened my mental health. They would make me tell them about my hallucinations, then get excited and say things like, "That's not a hallucination. That's a sign from God. That's the Archangel Michael giving you a message." I was seeing a psychiatrist at the time, and I had one friend I hadn't pushed away. One day, thanks to a new medication and my friend telling me I was in a delusion, I had a moment of clarity. I just sat there and realized, wait, I am schizophrenic. I am prone to delusions and hallucinations. Maybe this whole thing isn't as great as I thought. I immediately cut contact with everyone connected to that ideology. Since it was mostly online, I could disappear without much consequence. I stopped visiting blogs, ghosted anyone who tried to draw me back in, and went back to spending time with people I liked, instead of being constantly so serious all the time because God is watching. Now I just make dumb jokes online. Occasionally, someone from that group messages me to try to get me back, and I just reply vaguely, "I am glad you're enjoying being part of that community." Unfortunately, it just wasn't for me, but I hope you have fun. I got out after a little over a year. What creeped me out most was that many of the people in power were in their 30s or 40s, but most new recruits were teenagers. I was 19 at the time, and it felt really off. Believe it or not, spending a year with people repeatedly telling you all your delusions and hallucinations are real isn't good for a schizophrenic's mental health, especially when they encourage you to push away friends. So yeah, I don't know the odds of a schizophrenic getting sucked into a cult, but I imagine it's rare. TLDR, If a trusted friend tells you that you're in a religious cult and being taken advantage of because you're schizophrenic, they're probably right. And if a supposedly fun group is led mostly by adults in their 30s and 40s but recruits mostly teens, that's probably not a great group. Story 5. I was out late, drinking beer with friends at a bar, feeling euphoric and unusually generous. Eventually, my friends left, and I got lonely, so I started chatting with some random people outside the bar. I ended up giving all my money to a few homeless guys and talked with them for a while about politics and their life stories. Finally, I decided to head home and knock the hell out before I gave away my coat or something else my stupid drunken generosity might inspire. That's when I noticed a guy, maybe 27, crying. He was wandering aimlessly, with tears streaming down his face and snot running from his nose. I stopped to give him a tissue. I always carry some, you never know, and asked if he was okay. He broke down and clung to me, sobbing. Totally bizarre behavior for a stranger, but I could tell he was extremely drunk and just needed a little help. I'd been there. After a minute of crying into my shoulder, he explained that he had lost both his phone and wallet and had forgotten where his hotel was. He'd been wandering for hours in the cold with no coat. I took pity, looked up his hotel on my phone, and it was literally right around the corner. I went full mother hen mode and guided this drunk guy safely to his hotel. Now I am lower middle class, and this hotel lobby just screamed rich. Fireplaces, uniformed attendants everywhere, gorgeous furniture, classy lighting. Later I looked it up, and one night there costs $500. Oh my God. The guy immediately starts complaining to the staff about losing his wallet and wandering outside for hours in just a t-shirt. He's whining, pouting, and clearly drunk. I was mortified, hate wasting employees' time with nonsense, and he wasn't being kind or considerate. But the staff? They handled it like pros. They nodded, stayed calm, and told him exactly what he wanted to hear. I was genuinely impressed by their professionalism in dealing with a drunken, entitled mess. By this point, my job was done. He'd found the hotel, and I was about to leave. But to my surprise, he invited me up to his room, still buzzed and still a little worried about this drunk rich guy. I helped shepherd him upstairs. And oh my God, you guys, his friggin' room was like... I felt like Shane Dawson reacting to Jeffree Star's mansion. The room had super high ceilings, a huge bed, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a plate of perfectly arranged berries. Let me repeat, a casual plate of arranged berries. We immediately started eating the berries and chatting, or rather, I listened to him complain about the evening. Apparently, this drunk guy had taken his friend's private jet to get to New York, gone really drunk on a helicopter ride, and started blacking out. Somehow, his friends either left him, or he wandered off. The details were fuzzy. After we finished the raspberries, he decided to draw a bath. I was like, okay, this is weird as hell, but I am gay and not entirely opposed. I tried giving him privacy, but he didn't care at all, and honestly, he wasn't bad to look at. Meanwhile, he somehow found his backup iPhone. Apparently losing his wallet and phone is common for him, and FaceTimed his friends to summon an Uber. I kept him hydrated, and I could tell he was getting more coherent. Then he pulls out a Versace bag, totally stuffed with stacks of $100 bills. I'd never seen that much cash in my life. I was shook, gooped, gagged. He counts out $1,000, bragging about how expensive the bag was. Something like $5,000 friggin' rich people, am I right? Then he hands me $1,000 and says, "Thanks for helping me out tonight." I was friggin' shook, my wig snatched, my cheeks quivering, my pocket full of $100 bills. I'd never been paid that much at once before, and I absolutely wasn't expecting it. But did I complain? Hell no. You know I took that. So anyway, we go to the club where his friends are, and I feel like a street urchin among models. Everyone is white, thin, tall, and incredibly well-dressed. They're the queer upper 1%, and I feel woefully underdressed. Meanwhile, I am lugging around my huge puffy coat, backpack, and my hair is a complete mess. But the guy introduces me to his friends, and they praise me and buy me drinks with their endless wallets full of cash. All in all, I had a wild, magical night, and ended up going home with a hot guy who might have given me herpes. I'll have to get tested, but the chances are apparently pretty slim. So yeah, that was my night. I am $1,000 richer, and I might actually believe in karma now. After I was generous with the homeless guys, this dumb, drunk, ultra-rich guy ended up being super generous with me. What goes around comes around, my dudes. Not sure it's one in a million, but it's a story I love sharing. I've lived in Detroit for 2 years and grew up in the surrounding metro area. I've always been fascinated by the Art Deco architecture of the city's old buildings. Last year, Ford announced they would buy and renovate the old Michigan Central Station, turning it into the headquarters for their autonomous and electric vehicle campus. This building, sitting decayed since the late 1980s, has been a poster child for urban decay, so the announcement felt like a miracle. Ford hosted a celebration and offered a tour of the building to selected employees. Knowing a friend who shared my passion for Detroit architecture and worked for Ford, I reached out to him about joining. On the day, I drove to the campus, pretended to be an employee, and snuck onto the bus taking employees to the site. The last stop of the tour was the Grand Atrium, breathtaking after years of decay. I was taking a video on my phone, still pretending to be an employee, when I felt a tap on my shoulder and heard, "What do you think?" I turned around and saw Bill Ford himself, the chairman of Ford Motor Company and descendant of Henry Ford. I could only manage Mr. Ford before cameras and actual employees surrounded us. I couldn't believe it. Not only had I sneaked into the tour, but I was the first person Bill Ford approached. Shout out to Detroit and its resilient people. Your day will come, and I hope to help shape the future of this city alongside you. Story 6. I was kidnapped while leaving work and held for 18 months, along with 2 other girls. The man who took us claimed to be an ineffable lower god and used cult tactics, manipulation, and control to make us function as his family. I was occasionally allowed to leave the house for errands, like going to the grocery store, but I knew that if I didn't return, the others would suffer my punishment. I finally escaped by attacking my captor when I believed he was about to harm me. Story 7. I lived in Florida for the first 18 years of my life and spent most of my free time outdoors, fishing, camping, what have you. The summer before my junior year of high school, I was hiking near my home with a buddy. We were stomping around some clay deposits inside a small ravine. Even minimal geographic relief feels dramatic on the flat Gulf Coast when it started to rain. And I don't mean a little drizzle, I mean full-on Florida rain. Our minds immediately jumped to the exciting possibility of a flash flood raging through the crevasses we were exploring. To be safe and make the day more thrilling, we decided to climb vertically out of the canyons instead of taking the long horizontal path. We reached the top, put our feet on solid ground, and I stood up only to feel the ground squirm beneath me. I had stepped on a snake. I screamed and kicked the snake off my foot by reflex. As an Eagle Scout, I immediately recognized the red-on-yellow pattern and realized it was a coral snake. We rushed home and drove to the hospital. The doctors informed my parents that the nearest anti-venom was a 3-hour helicopter ride away, and the first symptom, lung failure, would occur after about 2 hours. My parents called friends and family, and we spent the time together, not knowing if I would survive. Eventually, everyone left. My parents turned off the lights and we prayed. Around 2 hours after the bite, a nurse came into the dark room with a gurney, presumably to collect my body. I asked, "Has there been any developments?" To everyone's surprise, the doctors came in, shocked I was alive, and told me it was a dry bite. They advised me to remain whatever religion I practiced. Story 8. No idea on the actual numbers, but I was born with 12 fingers, identical extra digits on each hand. I no longer have them, as my parents chose to have them removed shortly after birth. There used to be a video of everyone finding out, but my aunt lost it after multiple moves. The fingers were fully functional and would have worked just like the intended 10. I have a small scar on each pinky from where they were removed. Fun fact, my older sister had 2 extra toes that never fully grew. They discovered this in high school after she broke her foot. X-rays revealed extra bones that never developed into toes. To answer a couple of common questions, no, I am not from Alabama or the South. The extra fingers had bones, muscles, tendons, and blood vessels, and my hands are shaped completely normally. They were positioned side by side like a double pack of Twix. The only limitation was sideways movement, as there wasn't much webbing between the original pinky and the extra one. Another fun fact, this comes from my dad's side of the family. My dad was born with 2 extra teeth, and my sister and I have different mothers. My parents removed the fingers to spare me the likely teasing from other kids, which I completely understand. Kids can be cruel, and having 12 fingers would have been easy target material. The removal was done by tying them off, as others in similar situations have mentioned. I don't have proof aside from the tiny scars. The larger one looks like a mosquito bite on my left pinky, and the one on my right is similar but flat. And now, this has become my most upvoted comment. I guess I am officially the 12-finger guy on Reddit. Story 9. In Afghanistan, I was walking to lunch on base when I heard a whistling noise. I turned and saw a Taliban rocket coming straight at me. It passed about 30 feet over my head and landed 70 feet behind me on the other side of a huge concrete wall. Had it been a little more humid or the angle slightly off, and it landed 10 feet closer on my side of the wall, I would not have been here. 30 to 40 feet closer, and I'd have been an amputee or dead. A few months later, one of our medics was actually hit by the same kind of rocket. It landed within 5 feet of him, and it took several hours to figure out because there was so little left of him. I got the 1 in a million miss. He got the 1 in a million hit. Story 10. When I was 16, I had an ingrown toenail corrected. Both sides were badly ingrown, so it had to be done in a hospital. The toenail never grew back properly, only as a long, thin strip. Over the years, it caused more and more problems. At 24, I had the nail removed, not permanently, because of ongoing issues. After the removal, I developed an infection at the base of the nail. Pieces of nail came out of the infection site, and the bone had eroded slightly from the infection. When the infection cleared, there was a hole in my toe where you could see the bone or touch it with podiatry tools. It eventually healed, leaving a scar, but the area is now filled in. Despite this, the pain continued. When the nail grew back, it again formed a thin strip, but this time the thickness became a problem. It was nearly 1 centimeter thick. It couldn't be cut with standard nail clippers, so I had a podiatrist take care of it. By the time I was 31, walking became unbearable. I asked for the nail to be removed permanently, but the doctors refused, thinking it was a fungal infection, even though lab scrapings never showed one. I had the nail removed 2 more times, and it grew back exactly the same. Finally, almost 3 years later, a doctor agreed to fully remove the nail permanently. During the operation, they discovered something they had never seen before. My toenail had grown downward into my toe and curled under the bone. The surgery took much longer than expected because the doctors called in others to see it. They said this unusual growth was why I had been in so much pain all those years. Story 11. I am a 19-year-old male. In August of last year, I was driving with my sister when her face suddenly went pale. "Gavin, your eyes are yellow," she said. I pulled down the passenger mirror, and to my horror, 2 yellow eyes stared back at me. Over the next month, I was constantly sick. The initial diagnosis was hepatitis A. But when things only got worse, I went back to the doctor. From there, I was sent to the ER, then transferred to the liver transplant unit at UCSF. By that point, my eyes had turned a muddy orange, and my urine was the color of mahogany. Thankfully, the team of liver specialists at UCSF managed to save my liver. The final diagnosis was autoimmune hepatitis, and today, my eyes are white again. Story 12. Not me, my wife. We lived in Jacksonville, Florida. She rarely gets sick, but she does have mild insomnia. Around Wednesday, she developed a low fever and complained of aches, sweats at night, and trouble sleeping. That weekend, she wanted to see a doctor. I told her it was probably the flu. She just wasn't used to the aches and reminded her that she always has trouble sleeping. I suggested that if she was still feeling bad on Sunday, we'd go to a clinic. Saturday night, she couldn't sleep at all, so we made an appointment for Sunday afternoon. On the way there, she started feeling better. The doctor checked her out. No fever, no symptoms, and said she had probably had meningitis but was already recovering. I was due to leave for a business trip to California the next day, Monday, and asked if it was safe to go. He said it was fine. That evening, my wife was eating, laughing, and seemed back to normal. Monday morning, I left early. That afternoon, my neighbor called to tell me my wife had been wandering in the street in a delirium. She didn't know where she was, so the neighbor drove her to the ER. I booked a flight home that night. At the hospital, they found she had a fever. Her white blood cell count was dangerously low, and she was completely out of it mentally. The doctors weren't sure what was wrong, and a team of specialists started examining her. I had to fill out paperwork about her medical history and where we had been. They suspected some sort of rare autoimmune disorder. Things looked grim. She was given transfusions and put on a cocktail of medications while they tried to figure it out. On the third day in the hospital, the infectious disease specialist came in. He said it was a blood parasite. Maybe tick-borne. She had been to the Midwest recently, so perhaps she picked it up walking in the woods or a park. The next day he returned and told me he had figured out the parasite. "Why didn't you tell me she left the country?" "What? She hasn't?" "Well, she has malaria." "Malaria? I thought you couldn't get that in the United States." "You can't. You need to go home and bring me her passport." "What the hell?" I retrieved her passport. Then the CDC showed up. They did a full case study on her, which they never released to us. Mosquito traps were set up around the neighborhood. Mysterious vans drove by spraying clouds of chemicals. My wife stayed in the ICU for a week, but eventually recovered fully. If you look at the 2010 CDC infectious disease report, you'll see a discussion of malaria and how every case was linked to travel in endemic areas except for one woman in Duval County, Florida, who got it from a cryptic vector. Story 13. When I was 14 years old, I woke up one day with severe stomach cramps. We called the hospital, and they told us it was probably a stomach flu and to see a doctor the next morning. After one of the worst nights ever, vomiting and sleeping next to the toilet, we went to the doctor. I had a fever of 40 degrees Celsius and was in a lot of pain. The doctor suspected my appendix might be inflamed and advised me to go to the ER immediately. At the ER, I stayed in the hospital for about 2 weeks, but they couldn't find anything. They treated me with broad-spectrum antibiotics. After 2 weeks, I was feeling a bit better and was told I could go home to recover. That night, I went to bed and began hallucinating that I lived in a retirement home and pirates were coming to steal our food. I was flailing around trying to fend them off when my mother came in and asked what was happening. I explained, and she looked at me as if I had summoned a demon. She took my temperature, 41 degrees Celsius, and immediately took me back to the ER. Back at the hospital, I was treated for inflammation and underwent a wide range of tests again. They could see that something in my body was inflamed, but still couldn't find the cause. I stayed in the hospital for another 2 weeks. Finally, they discovered the problem. My appendix had been inflamed and had burst the night of my hallucinations, but it hadn't shown up on any scans. The doctor explained that there's about a 1% chance that an appendix is so stretched or inflamed that it becomes invisible on scans. If I had waited 2 more days, I could have died from the infection spreading. After 2 more weeks of antibiotics, they finally removed my appendix, and all the pain was gone. I ended up staying in the hospital for over 4 weeks because of my appendix and my incredibly unlucky 1% scenario. Story 14. How I met my wife. I am from the Netherlands. She's from the US. We met in Israel. It was my first weekend in Israel, and I decided to go on a pub crawl to meet people and have fun. As I was buying a ticket, my now wife walked up to the counter to buy one too. The girl working there introduced us. We hit it off that very night, but I was leaving in 2 days to stay with friends of friends in the middle of the desert for 3 months. 2 days after I left, I lost my phone and had no way to get back in touch with her. I had little money and could stay and work with the people in the desert, but I kept thinking about her. After a week, I decided to leave. I caught the next bus. It only runs 3 times a week at 5 a.m., and then took a train to Tel Aviv. I had no idea how to find her, where to stay, and very little money. I emailed a few hostels to try to arrange a work/stay agreement. These jobs are usually booked months in advance, so I didn't have much hope. Miraculously, I received an email when I arrived in Tel Aviv saying they had a spot and I could come in for an interview. Ridiculously lucky. After the interview, I dropped off my belongings and went back to the first hostel to see if they could give me any information they wouldn't. Now I was at a loss. Tel Aviv is a city of over 500,000 people. I didn't know anyone, and I had little more than the clothes on my back. Defeated, I started wandering the city. After a few hours, I got hungry and decided to treat myself to a restaurant. I ended up well outside the tourist area in a place that was almost empty and quite cheap. I sat down, ordered a drink and some food, and as it arrived, I saw her walking past. She saw me too. I was dumbstruck and just grinned and waved. Remember, I had lost my phone, so she thought I had ignored her. She waved and kept walking. I threw about 200 shekels, way too much, on the table and sprinted after her. I explained everything, and the rest is history. Story 15. I was struck by lightning while talking on a landline in the early 1990s. The lightning hit the telephone line and traveled through the handset straight to my ear. My parents drove me to the ER. I couldn't speak properly. My brain knew what I wanted to say, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. I had a terrible stutter. The doctor told me I had received a dose of good old-fashioned electroshock therapy. My speech was back to normal the next day, but ever since, I get a terrible headache whenever a thunderstorm rolls through. Story 16. I had 2 benign tumors, each 11 centimeters, growing in my spine, which gradually caused paralysis from my chest down. Doctors had no idea how the tumors had formed. Surgery took 11 hours, far longer than the 4 hours they had anticipated, because the tumors were so intricately woven throughout my spine. Now I have roughly half a spine and chronic pain, but I'd take that over losing my life to paralysis and being unable to breathe. Story 17. I have an unknown type of autosomal dominant centronuclear myopathy. My type is so rare that it hasn't even been seen before. Getting diagnosed was a multi-year struggle. They had to rule out pretty much everything else. It doesn't feel great to be in this club by myself. Countless blood draws, MRIs, CT scans, a biopsy, and a genetic test later, they finally figured it out. So far, it looks like only my father and I have it. Yay! Edit. As a researcher pointed out, this isn't truly rare. It's just a type that hasn't been seen in the population yet. There are probably more people out there who haven't been tested or diagnosed. In the future, I'll probably be 1 in 50,000 to 1 in 100,000. Sorry for making it seem like I was 1 in a million. Story 18. Not quite 1 in a million, but close enough. As a child, I had an extremely rare autoimmune disease. On top of that, I developed the rarest and most dangerous symptom. My kidneys started shutting down. Most kids recover from this disease, but not those with kidney complications. I was incredibly lucky. I never had to go on dialysis, and my kidneys eventually returned to normal function. It took a full decade to be completely cleared of the disease. My mother likes to call me a miracle child, not only because of this, but also because she was not supposed to be able to have children due to her health issues and had several miscarriages before my stubborn self decided to be born. Weird stuff. Story 19. I was so freakishly allergic to ant and bee venom as a child that a single sting from a common little black ant could put me into anaphylactic shock. When my allergist was preparing to start immunotherapy, he found that the in-office lab equipment wasn't sensitive enough to measure the infinitesimally small amount of allergen needed to start my titration. He had to send a sample of my blood to Johns Hopkins so their lab could determine the correct starting dose. I underwent immunotherapy for several years to reach an immune response level where it would be safe for me to basically exist in a non-frozen climate. Good news, I am fine now. I've had a few encounters with ants and wasps since my immunotherapy, and my body hasn't freaked out or shut down. Research suggests that if it hasn't happened after this long, I am probably safe for maybe forever. I don't carry EpiPens, and I am not overly afraid of ants or bees. Edit. To answer a few questions. I live in Florida. I am not outdoorsy, but stinging things are everywhere. It is, in fact, the Australia of North America. No, my parents would not move me to the frozen tundra to be a nomadic reindeer herder at my behest. Little black ants do, in fact, sting. Several Lasius subspecies have stingers and venom. When an ant bites you, that's using their mandibles and doesn't deliver venom. When an ant stings you, that's using their stinger, butt needle, and injects venom. Most ants do one or the other. Fire ants do both at the same time. I found an academic paper indicating that if I haven't had a reaction after this many years, the likelihood I ever would again is vanishingly small. I'll post it if I find it later. I feel completely safe carrying a cell phone instead of an EpiPen. Story 20. Earlier this month, I survived hypothermia. My brother and I walked to the liquor store in -40 degrees with wind chill. We were already a bit drunk and didn't check the weather. After grabbing the bottle, we headed back to chill in our fort, but I passed out. My brother ran to grab my dad to wake him up so we could get to the truck. I was probably unconscious for about 10 minutes while they found me, dragged me into the truck, and rushed me to the hospital. The doctor told my dad I didn't stand a chance and should be prepared for the worst. I remember waking up with a massive breathing tube shoved into my throat. I couldn't breathe and I was restrained to the bed, trying to pull it out. A nurse told me to breathe, and I managed once every 5 seconds until the doctor finally removed it. I gasped for life, feeling an incredible sense of relief. I looked around. I was in a gown, hooked up like a robot, wires all over me, 3 machines surrounding me, and 6 people in the room. Then the alarms went off, and I blacked out again. They monitored me for 8 hours until I was stable. I had been in cardiac arrest for less than 5 minutes, possibly even less. I was successfully revived and closely monitored. I woke up a day later, seeing my mother and brother. I was still high on morphine, so I mumbled a few words and smiled at my mom before passing out again. I survived. My hands got frostbite badly, but they're normal now. This happened on the 10th, and I am recovering with a new lease on life. It's been hard to process this, and I am still unsure how to feel, whether I should be upset, sad, or something else. I am not. I just know I need to get my life together. I could seek pity or sympathy, but I am past that. I am moving forward. Life is short, and I have to make the best of it. Story 21. My bones didn't grow properly, or more precisely, their ends didn't form correctly. Doctors don't know the exact disease because all of my bones are affected, and my muscles and ligaments are also compromised. It was discovered when I was 4 because I cried whenever I had to walk. Back then, my doctors tried to fix it with multiple conservative surgeries, but all of them failed. I ended up with a weak body, lost a lot of muscle mass, and couldn't regain it because every movement was painful. The worst pain was in my legs, since they have to carry my entire body weight. As a final solution, my doctors recommended that I live my life in a wheelchair. I refused. Later, I found a new doctor who immediately operated on me, giving me hip bone prostheses on both sides. Over 20 years of pain had changed my personality, but with the prostheses, my pain has reduced significantly, and I can now handle myself and live my life. I am currently waiting for knee replacements as well. In the meantime, at least I can go hiking and swimming, gradually rebuilding my muscles. Doctors believe my condition is a type of Perthes disease. Story 22. Not sure if it's 1 in a million, but it's pretty rare, so I'll write about it here. I have a medical condition called cyclic vomiting syndrome, which causes frequent, unpredictable bouts of nausea and vomiting. It can be triggered by many things. For me, the worst offenders now seem to be lack of sleep, stress or anxiety, and other illnesses like the flu. I first started experiencing symptoms when I was just 1 year old. Every month around the same time, I would throw up uncontrollably. None of the doctors my parents took me to could figure out the cause, but my dad's sister, also a doctor, noticed that my symptoms were similar to a newly discovered condition called cyclic vomiting syndrome. My childhood was shaped by monthly visits to the hospital for IV fluids to prevent dehydration. The staff knew me by name and my trusty green bucket. I remember countless birthday parties and summer camps cut short because an episode landed me back in the hospital. One of my fondest memories from elementary school was my teacher having the whole class call me to sing happy birthday, since I had gotten sick during my actual party the day before. As I grew older, school and life became more stressful. I missed upwards of 30 days of school per year, and to avoid being labeled, only my close friends and teachers knew why. Even now, as a college student, I've begun to grow out of the condition. I no longer have stomach pain during episodes, and vomiting is much less frequent, though nausea still occurs almost weekly. But when I am not feeling nauseated, I am just a normal, fully functioning young adult. That's all I ever wanted growing up, to be normal. I may never fully get there, and that's okay. For anyone facing a chronic illness, what matters most is making the best of what you have. Never be afraid of being judged. If someone judges you for something you have no control over, they're not worth your time, energy, or thoughts. If anyone shares my condition or wants to know more about it, feel free to ask. I wrote this for myself, as I've been struggling a little lately at school, but I'd be happy if it also helps someone else. Story 23. It's more of something that happened rather than something I am. Not sure if it fits the question, but it's the only story that comes to mind. About a year ago, I parked my car on campus next to my buddy's car, took a picture of both our cars, and went to class. An hour later, my phone rang. It was a police officer who got my number from the university help desk. He told me to come out to my car immediately. My mind went straight to the small amount of weed I had hidden in my car. From half a mile away, I saw what looked like 10 cops surrounding it. Later, I learned there were actually 4 cops, 4 campus security officers, and 2 guys dressed in black. When I got closer, they confirmed my identity, asked to see my recent pictures, and then began searching my vehicle. They arrested me for intimidating someone. On the way to the police station, the officers kept saying I had messed up and that it was good I had been arrested because I had crossed paths with a psychopath who would have harmed me otherwise. I had no idea what they were talking about. The questioning lasted 2 hours. They kept insisting they had me on camera and that I should stop denying involvement. After 2 hours, they let me call a lawyer, but since I didn't have one, I called my dad, who works 5 minutes away. He arrived quickly, explained the situation to the officers, and convinced both the cops and the psychopath that I wasn't involved. That day, I learned that a similar photo of my car had been sent to someone who was being harassed on Instagram. I was certain I hadn't sent the photo, and the cops and university security said no one else could have taken it in the 1-hour window between when I parked and took the picture. The person being harassed had called his dad the psychopath, who was apparently ready to seriously hurt me. Luckily, campus security called the police first, which is why the officers had said I was better off arrested. The next day, I went to the campus security office and demanded to see the security footage. Only a few other people were seen on camera, just some girls getting into a car and leaving. Slowing the footage down, we saw their car stop at the exact place the photo was taken for about 5 seconds. They were later called to the office and admitted they had taken the photo. It still boggles my mind how my simple decision to take a picture of my and my buddy's cars almost landed me in jail. Story 24. During a sleep study when I was little, after experiencing persistent sleep problems, doctors discovered something unusual. I essentially behave like a zombie when I sleep. I have insomnia and struggle to fall asleep, but when I do finally sleep, I don't wake up easily. When I sleep, everything shuts down. My heart stops, brain activity drops almost to nothing, I don't move, and I barely breathe. The doctors had to wake me several times and couldn't figure out what was happening. Eventually, they let me sleep, and I stayed in a near-death state for 2 hours before waking up just fine. This still happens, so I don't dream or sense time passing while I sleep. From my perspective, I fall asleep and wake up instantly. This has caused additional sleep issues, cognitive problems, random pains, heart palpitations, and muscle spasms. There's very little anyone can do because the cause is unknown. I've also survived entire weeks without sleeping, several times when my insomnia began at age 7, and managed not to completely lose my mind. Well, not completely, anyway. Story 25. I have a rare genetic disorder in my eyes called retinitis pigmentosa. I think only a little over 2,000 Americans have been diagnosed with it. It's a degenerative disease that slowly takes away your field of vision, and there's no way to correct it with glasses or surgery. I've seen many types of eye doctors, and while trying to explain it, most looked at me like, what? Because they'd never heard of it. Most tests showed nothing wrong. The simplest way to describe my vision is this. Take the middle cardboard part of a paper towel roll, hold it up to your eye, and look through it like you used to pretend you were a pirate. That's basically what I can see with my right eye. My left eye isn't as bad, but both are slowly worsening over time. I am apparently one of the luckier ones, as I still have my central vision, though the area affected can be random. My doctor guesses I may be effectively blind by around age 50. I am 25 now, so I still have some time. Until a couple of months ago, there was no cure. Now there's a treatment, but it costs about $800,000. It's expensive, but for the longest time, I assumed I'd just have to accept going blind. At least now there's hope for me and for many others with rare genetic disorders. Story 26. A guy accidentally folded what would have been a bad beat jackpot winning hand. $10,000 for him, $5,000 for the winning hand, and $1,000 table share. And then the same guy won the bad beat jackpot 5 hands later. For casino poker players, you know that's got to be better than 1 in 10 million. Small background. A bad beat happens when your incredible hand gets beaten by an even better incredible hand. The casino I was at had a minimum qualifying hand of a full house, aces full of 10s or better, beaten by 4-of-a-kind 10s or higher. I was playing $1 to $2 no-limit hold'em with about 6 other players when a relative newbie sat down. About 30 minutes later, he got into a hand with another player. The board ended up AAA 9. The other player bet $25 on the river, and the new guy folded, saying, "Well, all I have is a full house. You must have an ace, so I'll lose." The other player said, Wait, what did you say?" Turns out the new player had JJ aces full of jacks and mucked his hand. The other player had AQ quad aces queen kicker. The pit boss was called, and the rest of us freaked out because the table share alone would have been $1,000 each. But there was nothing we could do. Once you muck your hand, it's over. The dealer verified it would have won the jackpot. Poor guy just lost $10,000 he should have had. Literally, 5 hands later, the same new guy gets into a hand with me and one other player. We all went all in after the flop. The new guy had AA, I had K9, and the other player had QQ. The flop came Q6-6, the turn a Q, and the river an A. New guy. Aces full of queens, wins $10,000. Other player, quad queens, wins $5,000. Me and the rest of the table, busted flush, win $1,000 each. We spent the rest of the night trying to calculate the odds of a bad beat qualifying hand happening to the same guy, at the same table, within 5 hands. Bad beat jackpots can go for months without being hit at a casino with 6 tables running full time. We couldn't wrap our heads around it. Truly mind-boggling and definitely more than 1 in a million. Story 27. This only happened yesterday, but here it goes. I've been collecting old photos and postcards for years. I buy them from estate sales, garage sales, flea markets, antique stores, anywhere and everywhere, and I have hundreds. I don't really know why I collect them since they're all complete strangers, but I find them fascinating, like little windows into the past. Last night, I decided to reorganize my collection. I came across a postcard addressed to Kurt Benson, which happens to be my uncle's name. I sent a picture of it to my mom, just because it was mildly interesting. She happened to be with him at the time and showed it to him. I told her it was dated 1916 and signed by someone whose name started with an E. She asked me what the address said. I could barely make it out, but it seemed to say river in the beginning of Nebraska. I didn't understand why she was asking until she told me that her grandpa, my uncle's namesake, had lived in Wood River, Nebraska. I looked closer at the postcard and realized it said Wind River. My great-great-grandfather's name was Einer, and the signature on the postcard looked like it could be his. So my great-grandfather was named Kurt Benson and lived in Wind River, Nebraska in 1916, and his father was Einer. I believe this postcard is from my great-great-grandfather to my great-grandfather. 100 years later, I bought it at an antique store. The front of the postcard shows a group of people in a car. Back then, it was common to have personal photos printed onto postcards for mailing. It's possible that my great-great-grandfather is one of the people in the picture. Story 28. Not sure if this counts, but the odds are probably well over 1 in a million. When I was about 12, we went to visit my aunt in Florida and went to SeaWorld. We decided to ride a roller coaster. I think it was the Kraken. The ride was 4 people wide, me, my 2 sisters, and my aunt. I was on one end, my aunt on the other. Somewhere on the ride, there's a loop. At the top, her business BlackBerry fell out of its holster. Nobody realized it at the time, of course, since we were on a roller coaster. When we came down from the loop, the phone somehow landed right in my lap. I thought, no way that just happened. I quickly grabbed it because we were going up another hill and didn't want it to fall again. At the end of the ride, I showed her the phone and told her what happened. Pretty crazy odds that it would fall out and land exactly in my lap instead of on someone else. Story 29. Kind of a long story, but crazy nonetheless. I was attending the Austin City Limits Music Festival with some friends. Another friend, let's call her Ashley, was arriving late and wanted to meet up with us for Paul McCartney, the headliner that night. She mentioned that some of her friends were already at the festival and had her give them my number to coordinate. About an hour before Sir Paul was set to start, I got a text. "Hey, this is Matt, Ashley's friend. Where are you guys?" We exchanged texts detailing landmarks to meet up. They had trouble finding us, so they suggested the nearby bathrooms. Matt said he'd be wearing an anti-social club shirt. I walked over and sure enough, found 2 guys, one in the ASSC shirt. I introduced myself, we exchanged pleasantries, and they asked how I knew Ashley. I explained that I knew her from Dallas. She used to be married to a friend of mine, but we still keep in touch. Both guys looked puzzled. They said they never knew Ashley was married or that she lived in Dallas. That didn't faze me. Maybe she hadn't disclosed it. What did faze me was when they said they knew her from a Boston-area university, which I knew she never attended. We started cross-referencing last names and realized we were talking about 2 completely different Ashleys. It turned out Matt had meant to text a number just 1 digit off from mine. The odds blew my mind. 2 guys from Boston traveled all the way to Texas for ACL, texted the wrong Dallas area number for their friend Ashley, and somehow that wrong number, mine, was actually at the festival, expecting texts from Ashley's friends. All 3 of us stood there dumbfounded, shared a beer, and then went our separate ways. I hope those guys had a great time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.